they doubt me, they don't know. Yeah, I just wanna be the greatest. Everybody knows my name, shit. I'ma have this whole fucking game list, spitting with insane wit, and I'm gonna be famous. Ain't nobody able to delay this. Coming up, I had a vision to make it. Never wanted to be nothing, always wanted to play shit. Sit in class, always wondering why I'm on this lame shit. How the hell am I different if we all know the same shit? I ain't never let them doubt me, it's about me. Keep my head down, let my mouth speak. They surround me, they all about the clout, see where the crowd be. Every time I speak loudly, they more about me. Man, you know I got a bounty on these lousy ass haters that surround me. Still they doubt me, they don't know nothing about me. Still their mouths free, I'ma change that soon. Better watch out now, see?
I just wanna be the greatest. Yeah. And I just wanna be famous. Yeah, I just wanna be the greatest. Yeah. And I just wanna be famous. Yeah.
And I'm not playing any more games. Either put me on the charts or I'll put you up in flames. Better recognize art, cause I don't forget names. Should've seen me from the start, coming at you like a train. Think I'm about to fall apart every single fucking day. Seeing all these damn stars with my well-deserved fame. And I spit these gold bars while they spitting out shit. Man, I give this shit hard, but it gives me back pain. I wanna be a spectacle, they skeptical. But man, I got that chemical, exceptional. I do it all intentional, professional. So I can make that decimal incredible. I'm not thinking, man, they're saying that I've gone insane. I'm not ever gonna make it cause the game has changed. I'm not good enough, man, no that's not okay. Tell me that shit again and I'll stop the brain.
Yo, how's everybody doing?
Yeah. And I just wanna be famous. Yeah. Yeah, I just wanna be the greatest. Yeah. Man, I just wanna be famous. Yeah.
Now wake up, you got some shit to do. It's 6 a.m., I don't care, you got some shit to prove. Cause right now, you ain't got nothing that big to lose. So get your ass to work and don't you dare hit snooze. Can't stop this, I'm obnoxious.
This
and
song
I'm
is
honest
so
and
true.
novice with promise. Made monstrous, I'm conscious, but I'm nauseous. Think I've lost it, I've got it. Spitting all this still.
All right, so we are on. Sorry about being a little bit late, but I was listening to a podcast. Two of my favorite podcasts of all time have come back. The Uncanny X-Cast, which I loved. I listened to them for years, and they're now back. Probably because of the show, but hey, who cares? It's a good. At least they're back. And the other one is, why can't I remember the name right now? It's not Back Issues, although I liked Back Issues back in the day. Anyway, there's it's with Big Honkin' Steve. I can't remember their name right now. What is the name of that show? Anyway, they're both back, and so I'm very, very, very happy. All right, tonight. Well, first off, this week we are going to be doing some Genesis. We're going to be looking at Gavin Ortlund and Dan McCullen, and we're going to be putting them against each other head to head. See who wins, like we're playing with GoBots and Transformers when we were kids. Transformers always wins, by the way. No, I did not play with G.I. Joe and Transformers. I didn't like G.I. Joe. Anyway, we're going to have an interview later this week, it looks like. That's going to be a good one. It's going to be with an opposing guest, a new opposing guest. I finally found someone to oppose me on Catholicism. So that's going to be fun. It's going to be an open dialogue between someone who opposes Catholicism, who's an ex-Catholic, something I've been wanting to do for years, for almost 11 years now. So this is going to be good. Anyway, let's get into it. Here we go. Some Gavin Ortlund. There we go. There we go. There we are. Nope, that's not Gavin Ortlund. That's Nefex. Okay, let's switch it. There we go. There's my boy. All right, let's check out what he has to say.
The Bible's account of human origins in Genesis 2 and 3 and this famous story of Adam and Eve. Jerry.
Now, I've already watched this. I was watching this just before I was supposed to be working out, and I didn't work out, and I feel bad because I'm getting a little chubby again. So I gotta hit the gym. Gavin Ortland says some stuff here that I know he knows he doesn't. I know he knows he doesn't think these things. I know he knows that we know he doesn't think these things, but he has to say these things because he's talking to a Protestant evangelical audience. And that is upsetting because the stuff that he does believe is already controversial and already a little anti-historical, a little woo-woo, if you will. And I think it's interesting that he is taking on this subject. I think when I did it, I lost a ton of viewers on my channel. Mind you, my channel wasn't big, so but it hurt me when I did what he's now going to do. And I think he has a large enough audience that he can take the hit. But I do think he compromises a lot to say what he wants to say, and that's a shame. So it makes it hard to know what's his real opinion and what's him playing both sides. So we're going to play a little bit. I might get up and actually read this. I've done 2 or 3 of these. I've actually done a line by line on Genesis before. I've done other videos revamping it and re-editing and adding new information that I know. Genesis is one of the things that I love to read about. I think it's really dense. It has some good stuff. Obviously, Jordan Peterson did an amazing one. That's going to be hard to top. But anyway, let's go.
Coin is an example of this. He talks about the clear results of populations genetics that Adam and Eve could not have existed. He uses this issue to proclaim the victory of science over religion, and he references the real difference between science and religion. Science discards ideas when they fall to pieces. Faith
what's
tries
going
to
on here with
cobble
the camera?
them together into something that still convinces gullible
Hey, camera,
believers.
what are you doing?
Now, I won't give other examples of this way of thinking. I learned when I cited Bill Maher in my videos on the flood. Don't don't trigger people, but you're familiar with this. Most of the people who watch my videos from one side or the other are aware of and familiar with kind of the science versus faith kind of issues.
Is that better?
So you're aware. You've heard this kind of thing before. In this video, I want to respond to those claims. I can't even
look. It's so
and
bright.
I want to argue that the biblical account of humanity has not been falsified in the modern world. On the contrary, it's a gift to the modern world. It's what the modern world is searching for. The story of Adam and Eve in Genesis 2-3 is like food for the hungry. It offers us this foundation for what we all long for, namely the true story that explains who we are and what is significant about human beings. And it's a story that we can't find elsewhere.
I'll be honest with you. Part of me wants to just play like 5 minutes of him, then 5 minutes of Dan, then 5 minutes of him, then 5 minutes of Dan, then 5 minutes of him, then 5 minutes of... I don't know. Depending on how many people come in here, I might play around with something like that. I realize it'll be terrible for the later on people who watch later on. Most people watch around 10:30 now in the morning. I don't know. Am I going to do that? Am I going to be experimental today?
Fully. So it's unique as well. At the same time, this...
How do I feel about that? Okay, people who are coming into this about 10 minutes from now. Do you think the story of Genesis is unique? Already we have 2 versions. I'm looking at the wrong camera. Already we have 2 versions. We have 2 accounts of Genesis. We have 2 creation accounts. If you've read, not if you're coming from Zeitgeist or some other crap that isn't true, if you've read the actual creation myths in other stories, in other religions, do you think that the Christian creation myth is unique in its prospects, in its principles, in its maxims? What do you think? Is it unique? Have you read the Mesopotamian creation accounts, the ancient Greek creation accounts? Are you aware of any Native American creation accounts, the Popol Vuh or anything like that? What do you think? Is the Christian story truly unique and different than other creation accounts? Let me know.
Is a difficult passage of scripture. It needs to be interpreted carefully. A lot of Christians assume the most literalistic way of reading it. I'm going to put.
So the first time I read the Bible, not the first time I finished the Bible, not any of that kind of stuff. The first time I read it, I took it literally. Mind you, I was 12. And I didn't get past the Giants. Giants just threw me right off. The Giants and the people living for thousands of years. I was just like, I can't read this. This is crap. Okay, so yeah, we might read Genesis today. Okay, let's keep going.
Push back against that as well. And so this will be kind of a controversial video. I'm aware of that. I've counted the cost. I've already been through this. I've kind of made a resolution just to never shy away from talking.
I mean, it killed my channel, but sure, Gavin. You apparently have millions of dollars to and no mouths to feed. Oh, that's right. You don't have millions of dollars and you have tons of mouths to feed. Be careful alienating your audience.
Talking about something if it's in line with the goal of my ministry, which is Truth Unites exists to cause gospel assurance. Through theological depth. And this is an issue that causes a lack of assurance. It causes deep anxieties. And I think when we shy away from something just because it's controversial,
for all your Bible assurance
needs. For failure, and it contributes to that anxiety, and it contributes to the struggles. You know, we've just got to find a way in the body of Christ to talk about these things, and in a spirit of sincere openness before the text of Scripture, working through it.
Okay, but what he's saying right here is bullshit. It just is. Because I've had these conversations with Christians. They don't want to have them. You know who was willing to have these conversations with me? Atheist. You know who was willing to have these conversations with me? That's just it. Atheists. Nobody else was willing to do these conversations. The Christians should just get pissed off and leave the room. My understanding of biblical scholarship until the last 7 years. Excuse me, I should have muted that. Sorry. I'm drinking too much soda. My understanding of critical biblical scholarship, let's say that, was apologetics. And I did not have an apologetics view. I immediately viewed it, once I had a mind to understand things, as polemics. And it isn't until, and I was bastardized and an outcast for that belief system until the Pope until the Pope came up and said, no, it's polemics, and it became popularized that he said that. Until he said that, I was looked at as a really bad person for not taking Genesis literally. Mind you, not for my behaviors, but for my understanding of the gospel and not taking it literally. And even as an adult, there was at least one place that I worked where that was an issue. The fact that I didn't take the Bible literally was a problem for people. The fact that I took it as literature. So, I mean, this is a huge deal for people. And for Gavin Ortland to downplay this, and I get it, he's trying to be ecumenical, and that word that he uses all the time that I can never remember. But people take the moment that you say, okay, this here can't be literal because this part of the story is not actually in Genesis. It's actually from over here. The moment you start saying that stuff, you're either automatically labeled an atheist, or you're demonic, or you're satanic. And that's it. You're now you're now with the Wiccans, you're now with the goth kids, and that's who you're gonna have to have these conversations with, and they're atheists, so they don't care about this. So this is huge for the Christian community, and the fact that more and more Christians are coming around to this, even pastors, is amazing. But they're only coming around to it on the progressive side. You don't have conservative Christians, whether it's Catholic or otherwise, hitting this. Even Jimmy Akin, who will admit to this stuff, gets labeled a liberal. So I think you're being dishonest here, Gavin. I don't think you're being dishonest in a bad way. I think this is a good white lie, but it's a lie. This is apologetics. You're being apologetical about the truth, and then you're not even going to commit to the whole truth because it's going to alienate your audience. And even though you say you're going to be blunt about it, when I heard this the first time, I heard equivocation. I did. Mind you, I was distracted doing other things, so maybe when we hear it now, maybe it's not going to play that way in my second viewing. But I heard equivocation in your voice. I heard you edging out some of the harder things for a traditional Christian to accept. So let's keep going.
And so forth. So I'm going to try to do this. I hope this will be helpful for people in this video. I'm aware these are challenging things to talk about. I want to give my life to help people and to serve the cause of truth. So I've kind of just said, come what may. I mean, if not.
Yeah, but then you're going to go straight into original sin, which is fine. That is a teaching of the Catholic Church, but you're not a Catholic. And for instance, in Judaism and in Orthodoxy, original sin isn't a thing. So you have to find where that is in the Bible, especially if you don't have a magisterium, you don't have a secondary tradition that is not biblically related in that sense, that it's not like word for word literal. You don't have a oral tradition, you don't have a Talmud, you don't have a magisterium, you don't have the church fathers to fill in the gaps, you don't have a hadith. So I don't know, man. I don't know. When I heard this first time, I heard you slip into a lot of apologetics, and I'm grateful that you're even doing this. But I don't think this was your most honest video. I think you were trying to be honest, and you ended up being tactical.
Nothing else. Even if my videos make you angry, at least know they're coming from a heart that is sincerely committed to trying to help advance what I believe is true.
And I do think he's doing that. I want to be very clear. I know I just griped at him, but I do think he's talking to an evangelical Christian Protestant audience who is having trouble with the flood, who's having trouble with creationism, evolution, young earth creationism, and he's trying to help them along. He's trying to say, look, it's an old earth. The flood was a local flood. It wasn't a global flood. He's trying. He is. And I think he's going to do a better job than Dan McKellen or Joshua Bowen or even Kip Davis, because the Christians who will not listen to the experts will listen to Gavin. The problem, I think, and again, I pre-watched this, is that Gavin equivocates and Gavin goes short of the truth in an attempt to get the audience to move, because he learned lessons from when he presented the flood as not being literal. He learned lessons from when he presented, there was another one that he did. But anyway, what was it? Now I can't remember. Anyway, he has been doing this work, and he has been seeing how the audience responds to this. And I've seen him struggle on Twitter and struggle under his comments to answer these people respectively. It's not like arguing with a Catholic where the Catholic already believes these things and you guys can just find common ground. You're talking to your own side, and your own side is calling you a heretic. That's different. And I've been through that. So I feel for Gavin, but I think you have to bite the bullet. If you're gonna do this, you have to go all the way. You can't half measure the truth, because then you're still lying. You got to go all the way in.
So now at the same time, the goal of this video is not actually to arrive upon a conclusion in terms of one specific option for how to put things together. Rather, what I'm going to try to do is bring conceptual clarity about the various options that are.
I'm going to bring conceptual clarity about the various options you can take. Go back to Catholic Answers 10 years ago. You don't have to believe the scientific opinion, but if you believe it, you're not excommunicated. It's an acceptable, tolerable belief. I don't know what apologist that was, but there you go.
Are on the table for Christians. I want to increase awareness and engagement in this important area. And then I want to encourage a certain disposition toward the question that I'm going to
I
describe
don't know if
as
we're
a
going to get to the back end of the
groundedness on
video, but over
central
here he
issues,
just
but more humility and
starts
open-handedness on
countering
some of the
himself.
peripheral issues that come up. If this video is successful, it will accomplish three things. Number one, it will provide some answers to secular critiques. Number two, it will inculcate patience within the body of Christ when we talk about these things and when we work through our differences. And number three, it will reduce anxiety along the way for struggling Christians who are wrestling with this. And there's a lot of people right now, especially our precious young people in the church. There are three sections. First, I want to argue that it's important for Christians to maintain and to uphold a historical Adam and Eve and a historical fall.
Historical Adam and Eve and historical fall. So I'm going to give you my argument. And I did this on my longer Genesis video. And I also did, I think I mentioned this in my shorter one that I did like 2 years after my original. So the characters in the Old Testament, in general, the names that you get, the anglicized names, are not the Greek names, and they're definitely not the Hebrew names. And they're not even the Latinized versions anymore. We just have an Anglicized Bible. So they're not the same names. So if you're looking for Adam and Eve and Job and Joel and Noah and Moses, you're not going to find them in the Bible, let alone in the Hebrew Bible, let alone in ancient society. So you got to throw those names right out the window. So is it possible that these events happen to a person? Sure. If the events happen and there's a survivor, then that person was there. Now, there are different cultural accounts of these stories. Some of them are very similar. Some of them are barely relatable, and other ones are completely different, but talking about a similar event, which leads some incorrectly to think there was a global flood or there was the Great Deluge or something else like that. Don't go there. Just realize that the name Adam is a name that the Jewish authors or oral teachers at this time used as a placeholder name for man. Okay, so man, woman, breath. There's also some question there if Eve should be breath or is it because there's another name for it other than woman that I've seen in some Jewish translations. Okay, so you realize that they're placeholder names. So if there was an Adam and Eve, they were not named Adam and Eve. Okay, so you get through that. Then you get to the, well, okay, but there was a first man and there was a first woman. Fine. And then you learn about genetic haplogroups. You learn about cultures and speciation. And you learn that for us to have the genetic variants that we have now, mutation and evolution is not enough. You need to have different variant groups. So then you understand there's different human species. And you're still trying to relate it back to the Bible. And you're like, well, I can fit all these little pieces in. It says there's different groups. It says that they all get killed off in the flood. So that's how the people get wiped out. Fine. It says that there's children of angels and men, and those are the demigods. So now we can fit in other cultures and other belief systems, and we're good. Okay. So now you're in college, I guess. And then you learn about biblical criticism, or you learn about languages, and you learn about maybe a different religion, so you read a different perspective. Turns out a lot of the stuff you thought was in there isn't in there. And now you're trying to understand, well, is the story true or not? And then you find out there's not just one story. There's at least two creation stories, and there's different versions of the story in the story that we have. So then, like a lot of college kids, you go and you find the Enuma Elish, you go and you find the Atar-Hasis, you go and you find different creation myths, and you say, well, it's based on this one, but it still happened. It just happened that this guy was a different name, it's a different guy. Except, what was that one based on? Where did that come from? What are the facts around that story? Are there any facts? Was it just a myth? So they're trying to, if you get to the place where some of the popes have gotten, where I have gotten, where Jimmy Akin has gotten, it's polemics against other cultures. And it's saying we're going to Judaize the surrounding myths, and we're going to say, no, this is the real truth, and their version is the false version, and our God is going to conquer their God. Tamat is going to be conquered by our God. Baal is going to be conquered by our God. Okay, so, all right, so you get there and you accept all that, and then one day you're 43 years old and you're watching Myth Vision for the first time, and Dan McKellen says, well, that's not how it translates. And and you're like, well, I got a Hebrew Bible. I got commentary under the Hebrew Bible by the rabbinical fathers. I got the Rashish. I got the Midrash. Okay, I go look that up. No, it says what I say. It's I must be right. Then you go and you look at the church fathers. So the church fathers say what I say. Well, that must be right. And then, if you're anything like me, you believe in science. And you go, well, what does the historical record say? Oopsie, we got a problem. Her historical record doesn't match what we got in Genesis. Doesn't match the commentary. Doesn't match the church fathers' understanding. Now what do? Now you're in a pickle. So you have to make a choice. Do I hold that any of this is literal, or is it all metaphorical? And people will try to press you on that issue. So you have to ride that line of how much of this is telling the story of man's fall, and how much of this is telling the story of the Jewish people's recontextualization of the greater cultures that have influenced them, so they can wash that out of their system. It's like money laundering, but they said it's myth laundering. They're trying to get the pagan cultures out of their belief systems, out of their group, out of their society. They want to close down all the other places of worship and only have one, only the main temple. So all the other ones that might be having a little bit of heresy, a little bit of paganism, a little bit of polytheism, we got to get rid of those. So then what of it is true and what of it is important? Well, all of it ends up being important because it helps shape your understanding of a singular monotheistic God. But if you're anything like the scholars, it also shows a lot of evidence that means that the Jewish people of that time, the Israelites of that time, didn't believe in a monotheistic God, at least not the majority of them. There was enough that it was a controversy, enough that you had to go out. And you can do like me and say, yeah, the Bible acknowledges that later on, so we're fine. But for a lot of people, they're not fine. A lot of people, their faith got broken maybe 5-6 sentences ago. So I think Gavin Ortlund is playing a little bit loose with this.
And I'll define that tricky word historical when I get there. Second, I want to encourage patience concerning
Hey, BS, what's going on?
A historical
Did you catch all of that?
With contemporary scientific claims. And then third, I want to give a description or taxonomy of
If I went too hard, BS, remember you're already an atheist. You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. You already didn't believe in the Bible. You're okay.
possible models for what that harmonization process could look like. So first, I want to make a case for a historical Adam and Eve and a historical fall. I'm aware.
So when you're talking about higher truths, as a Catholic, I can say I believe in Adam and Eve. And I can say I believe in original sin. And I can say I can understand other cultures don't. But if you want to talk about a historical, literal Adam and Eve, you're going to run into a lot of problems with reality. So let's say Adam and Eve. I like Jimmy Akin's answers that Adam and Eve were the first Homo sapiens. They're the first two sapiens to reach consciousness, to gain a soul, or to be granted a soul by God. Then his next one is why harmonization efforts are legitimate. I mean, I believe in hermeneutics, or I use hermeneutics, and I believe typology. Harmonization efforts, the blending of the story. I mean, you can retell the story, right? Okay. Surveying harmonization efforts. We'll get into that in a second.
that every single thing I argue in this video is going to get pressure from one side or another. So I can understand this is going to sound crazy to some people.
Yes, remember when I used to have more views on my religious channels, and then I did exactly what Mr. Gavin's doing here, and I lost all my views except for my atheist friends who were already hanging out in a different thing. I don't know if this is going to severely hurt his credibility, but I think it is. I think he's going to lose a lot of evangelicals and a lot of Protestants for what he's about to do here. And he doesn't even go all the way. It's a half measure, which I think a half measure is a no measure.
More secular people. But let me explain. So the adjective historical is kind of ambiguous here. There's a couple of distinct questions we want to disambiguate and kind of uncluster. First question.
Disambiguate. I don't think it's that, so V.S. Lewis, that's what it's because atheists are more loyal. I don't think it's that atheists are more loyal. I think that Christians are more skeptical of people's intentions. Ad Astra. Atheists are chill. Yeah. Okay, let's keep going into it. I'm going to get up in 1 second to turn on the fan because I'm starting to sweat.
Is just, are Adam and Eve real people in the past? Second, were Adam and Eve fresh de novo creations?
Oh my crap. Okay, I'm going to read these right now. Hold on. Let me turn on the fan because I'm sweating. Okay, were Adam and Eve real people in the past? Whoever Adam and Eve represent may have been real people. Were Adam and Eve fresh de novo creations are descended from previous hominins? We have no way of knowing that based on the story. Were Adam and Eve the first human beings? Yes. Were Adam and Eve the biological progenitors of all living human life? Or they're the progenitors of all monotheists? They're the progenitors of the Abrahamic line. They're the progenitors of the people of the Middle East. They're the progenitors of the cultures in Mesopotamia, around the Levant, possibly in the cradle of life. Whoever lived there, whatever society lived there, they are the representations of that society or that group or those people or those nomads, whatever they were. I would actually like to know, I know that sometimes some big brains come into my channel. Any heavy hitters or ringers who are watching, even if you're in incognito mode, is there any evidence of a humanoid hominid society, developed society in the Fertile Crescent? Is there, specifically I'm thinking about in that area which is now covered by water, where the mythical, not mythical Garden of Eden is supposed to be located whenever you ask crazy people on the History Channel. Is there any actual evidence of a human, group living there and surviving there and farming there and hunting there? If pre-agrarian, then I guess a nomadic people there. I'd be interested to know. Because if there is people there, not just in theory, but in actual evidence, then I think that's who Adam and Eve would be representing. Of course, there's always the possibility that Adam and Eve are two different groups of human beings. I don't like that argument for the story. And I think also pressing the story to that level of reality is completely missing the point of the story. I don't think the story should be pressed to be that literal. I think even asking these questions, especially the last two, is missing the point completely. To me, it feels like you're asking, well, was Pandora a real person? Do you mean like an ancient king who's represented by Zeus, gave a gift to a woman and she opened it after she was told not to. Sure, that might have happened. That's not impossible, but you're asking, were all the hopes and fears and dreams and everything of mankind in a box and it was released and only hope remained? No. So I think these questions are pushing the story beyond the limits of its scope. I think they're the wrong questions.
That is from scratch.
How's the
Or
sound
were
of
they
the audio
descended
from the
previous hominins? We'll find
from
that
the
word in a
video,
second.
by the way?
Third is, were Adam and Eve the first human beings? That's a slightly different question than the second question. And then another fourth question is, were Adam and Eve the biological progenitors of all living human beings? And that is also a separate question from the third question, because as we'll get into, this gets there's actually
The parent of our souls. You read Augustine, and he's very clear that he doesn't like this kind of speculation. He's very clear that all the options of where the soul comes from are not for us to know. So I'm very glad I read St. Augustine's On the Soul, because it just answers a lot of perspective on a lot of these questions. The church fathers and the doctors of the faith did not think this was the right direction for this kind of questioning. That it has nothing to do with religion, has nothing to do with faith, has nothing to do with saving your soul. The story's there so we can have an understanding, so we can have a framework for our belief system that matches with the belief system that already existed when these, I'm going to say, Jewish ancestors of our faith were writing. They were countering the myths of the surrounding cultures. So I think it's a mistake to push this beyond the limits of that kind of writing. Polemics, mythology, epic, poetry. You're going beyond the storyteller. You're at a campfire. And you're telling this story. You're in a sweat lodge and you're being told this story. Like, it has meaning, it has power. But the names are placeholders. The events, the literal events, like are placeholders for this representative events that they're actually representing. And the understanding switches and changes depending on your theological reference and your ability to grasp what's being laid down in the metaphor, in the analogy.
a number of different options that Christians have had.
How many horns does a unicorn have? I get it. You can ask that question, but it's the wrong question.
Advocated for that we'll have to work through here. Now, most of my work previously in the doctrine of creation is on Genesis 1 and the creation of the world. Here I'm moving on to Genesis 2 to 3, the creation of humanity. And for a lot of Christians, rightly so, I think, this is where the deeper worries and anxieties and challenges lie. There are a lot.
Okay, I'm going to recommend again, go back, and I'll try to link this in tomorrow under this video. Go back and watch my video on Genesis. I do a line-by-line analysis. Go back and watch my follow-up video where I update that in one video. I don't go line by line anymore, but I update that. But that original series was really good. It had a lot of good information, especially if you've never thought about these things that way. Unfortunately, a few years later, Jordan Peterson did his, and his was way better than mine, and of course more popular than mine. You can go watch his series on it, but he doesn't get into the nitty-gritty that Gavin is talking about.
A lot of Christians who are willing to say Genesis 1 is kind of an agree to disagree issue, even animal death before the fall, You can kind of see that both ways. You see all these quotes in the church fathers where they're saying, "Oh, animal death is fine," So a lot of people are more circumspect about those questions. But when we get to Genesis 2 to 3, the alarm bells start going off more, and we start to worry more. And I think that's a good instinct. I think this is more important. The concerns here come into the deepest questions about who we are, what is our need for the gospel, what does it mean to be human, how did the fall happen?
See, and in reading the commentaries, the Greek Orthodox commentaries, I love this as a Christian, but as someone who reads history, it's a dirty trick that they play. They tie in all of the references, all the typological references to Christ as the meaning of the original, as the intended meaning of the original author. And that's a dirty trick to play on the audience who doesn't know any better. If the audience knows better and they understand what's being said, then it's really awesome to have that typology highlighted. On the other hand, if you have no reference for real history, for authentic history, and you have no reference for how other people view the historical accounting of other cultures, it's Adam as the first Christ, Eve as the second wife of Adam, Eve as woman versus Eve as breath. What does it mean to come from the rib of a person? What does it mean to be created out of? What does it mean to inverse the order of creation? To have man be first instead of woman. And intentionally do so. And then to put that where now Eve represents the Virgin Mary. She's a typological representation of the Virgin Mary. When you start getting into this and you're using typological arguments and you don't explain that they're typological, I feel it's a dirty trick to play on the audience who doesn't know any better. I'm not saying it's not true, and I'm not saying you can't use it. Obviously, as a Christian, I believe that all the patriarchs are leading to Christ. But does that mean that all the patriarchs were literal? No, of course not. And Gavin, I'm not sure if it's in this video or another video that's related to this, he's going to try to say that, well, of course, if you're going to do a genealogy, then all the people in the genealogy would exist, because why would you write a genealogy with fictional characters? It's like, of course you write a genealogy with fictional characters. What are you talking about? That's exactly what you do. If I want to say something about myself, I am going to say, I am Ramon, my last name. I come from the line of Pancho Villa. I come from the line of Elicid. I come from the line of Getterex. I come from that line. That is who I come from. Well, obviously, I don't come from a fictional character that didn't exist. But I'm including that line to tell you something about myself. And yeah, you can overgeneralize it and say, well, of course, all Hispanic people come from this same line. And they do. They do. They all come from this same group. We're all Visigoths if you go far enough back. But I'm saying something. And if I say a different lineage, I'm from the line of King Arthur. I'm from the line of Julius Caesar. I'm from the line of Alexander the Great. I'm from the line of Vercingetorix. I'm from the line of Sargon of Akkad. Well, yeah. Well, now I'm saying something different about myself. Now I'm a conqueror. Or if I say I'm an American, I'm from the line of Pecos Bill and Echo stop. I'm from the line of Pecos Bill. I'm from the line of Paul Bunyan. I'm from the line of, I don't know, pick another one. Abraham Lincoln and George Washington. Well, two of those people are real. But what am I talking about? What am I saying? I'm from the land of Johnny Appleseed. I'm saying I'm American. These genealogies, when they apply to Jesus, are saying that he's Jewish, that he's representing the Jewish people. So, for those that don't know, I am 44 years old, 43 years old. And my illegitimate child, B.S. Lewis, now wants child support. I think he's over 20 and he doesn't get back taxes, back pay. What do you all think? Vote down below. All right, let's keep going.
So many important kind of foundational issues here that seem to go further in their theological consequence than just how old is the world and when did animal death come in. So I'm just saying, I think it's right to feel, and believe me, I've been wrestling with this for about 22 years now. And I feel the anxiety. I get that. I understand that. I felt that at times in my own life. What people like Jerry Coyne and others are saying is a challenge. And it comes at two levels. First, for a while now, there's been the challenge from what we call paleoanthropology, which is basically the study of early humanity. So you think of anthropology as the study of humanity.
Also, if you want to say the bad line, like you can say, if you want to lay someone down, make them look bad, you can say, well, this guy's ancestors include Benedict Arnold, include Judas Iscariot, includes Brutus. You're naming the biggest betrayers. You're saying what his character is like, what to expect from the person in the story.
Paleo anthropology, meaning the study of ancient humanity or early old humanity, and basically what we're talking about here.
V.S. Lewis says he would like to take a typological paternity test. I'd like to see you try, buddy.
Is fossils, archaeological artifacts like tools that we discover and so forth. And we're talking about especially hominin fossils. Hominin, so the word hominin usually now is taken to refer to all modern and extinct humans and their immediate ancestors. And then the word hominid with a D is a broader term referring to all modern and extinct great apes.
A few years ago, I tried to get some modern books on evolution to add to my library so I can have modern references. I couldn't find jack. I couldn't find anything on evolution that wasn't at least 20 years old, and they were all textbooks for like colleges. Like there was nothing. Where's the modern stuff on evolution? Where's that writing? Where's that going on? Where's the modern stuff on that? I know there's a paleontologist that I watch on YouTube who puts out stuff, but for the regular person, and I'm going to diatribe just for a second, and this is going against the dark magisterium. I think it is unfair when Dr. Bowen, Kip Davis, I don't remember the other person right now. I'm going to include Bart Ehrman, although Bart Ehrman, I don't think I've ever heard him actually do this. When they get upset with the lay audience for not having the knowledge, the general knowledge that could be accumulated without going to college. And I think that's unfair because they don't have access to the material that you have access to. And let me explain. I don't just mean like, oh, they don't have Amazon. Everybody has Amazon. I went to Barnes & Noble today to look and count how many books in the religious section were academic books and how much was apologetic books and how much was self-help and how much was low bar, like below apologetics. The majority was self-help. Some was Christian apologetics. I only saw one academic book. Only one, and it was one for the general public. It wasn't even one for academic-minded people. So how should you expect the regular Christian, the regular person, to come across this information? I did it, but I'm weird. People don't usually do what I do. I hunted down books. I went to different towns, to different libraries to find one specific book. I when I would travel, I would go to different bookstores until I found the bookstore that had the book I was looking for. people don't do that. So even though, yeah, now we have the internet, people are still trapped by their inculturalization. If you're Catholic, you can go to the Catholic bookstore. If you're Seventh-day Adventist, you're going to go to the Seventh-day Adventist bookstore. If you're Protestant, you're going to go to the General Protestant bookstore. If you're there's another one over here. There's like 3 right next to my house. If you're Jewish, you're going to go to the Jewish bookstore. If you're Muslim, you're going to go to the Muslim bookstore. And if you're a non-practicing Muslim, it's really hard to get a hold of the Hadiths without having a friend who can get you into that Muslim bookstore, who can get you past the gate, who knows the code, who knows the Imam, so you can go and buy those books. So I think it's unfair that the ivory gates of academia should be held against the general audience that doesn't have the ability to get these books. I think it's awesome that Amazon has made it possible that non-academics can get this material, but most of it's super pricey. You're talking about $100, $150, $250 for some of these books. When I was a salesman, I could do it because I was making that kind of money. Now that I'm back to working a normal job, I don't have the kind of money to buy those kind of books. I'd have to wait a month or 2 before I could save up enough to buy one of those books. So I do think it's a little unfair to hold the general public to that level. And I understand it's frustrating to have people say crazy, idiotic stuff to you. I have it happen on my channel. My channel's not even that big. But I think you have to be patient with people and understand that they don't have access. They don't have access to the same information. They haven't been told the same information. They haven't been indoctrinated or initiated into this way of thinking. And I think we have to be kinder to people when they say that the flood is real, or they say that Jesus had bronze skin. Even I've said that. Even not the flood is real thing, but I've said Jesus had bronze skin because I misread that text. So yeah, I do think we have to be kinder. And we have to be, when we hear people coming to us like that, we need to be gentler with taking the scales from their eyes.
So that's how I'm just going to use the term hominin when we're talking about these other species like Neanderthals and Denisovans and so forth. And even those words, I know I pronounce them probably wrong. I hear other people do it different. Anyway, I know even saying those words causes some people out there different reactions. All I can tell you is with a pastoral heart, I'm going to try to just work through this. So, and also the terminology about hominin versus hominid, that's not always consistent. You can see a little variation there. But bottom line is, we've always had, for a while now, we know we have these hominin fossils, okay? We've got to try to find some way to interpret that. But this whole area has kind of ratcheted up another level in terms of the challenge here because of the extra layer now that comes on from genetic science. So the claim on the table, okay, is that the human population never went through a bottleneck of fewer than about 10,000 people, much less 2 people. And that's pretty certain. That's put forward as like, we know that for sure. So you've got the paleoanthropological data that's already creating some angst, and then the genetic data comes in as like a 1-2 punch, and it's causing a lot of angst about this area. And rightly so. We should think.
See, he says rightly so. I don't think rightly so. It shouldn't cost you angst. It shouldn't cost you angst. When I was 13, and I tried reading the Bible for the first time, and I was reading the 700 Club Bible, the book, and I got to people living thousands of years and 500 years, and the larger numbers were so big that I was like, well, that's clearly just metaphorical. That's clearly just whatever. But then you get down to people living 150 years, and you're like, well, that's actually kind of possible. Why are these numbers here? Are they incorrect? And you search for explanations, and you can find them. Even back in the day before the internet was the internet, you could find this information, and you would have dozens and dozens of theories. And I think it was Dan McCullen. It could have been one of the other guys. Today posted a video that said, they're just made up. The numbers are just made up. They mean nothing. And I was like, well, there goes 20 years of my life looking things up. So yeah, let's be more sympathetic to people. I, Gavin, I totally want to make a sign of the cross for you because man, you are kicking a hornet's nest.
This through. It's a tough area. It's so important. So how do we respond? Well, I'm going to argue that we shouldn't just reject all of those claims, and a lot of the viewers of my channel will disagree with me about that. But first, and I'll just ask for patience and ask for your listening ears first. I'm condensing a lot of research down into a relatively short video here. I could just ask you to hear me out, okay? So first of all, let me highlight what I think we can't give up. And I think it's absolutely imperative to retain a historical Adam and Eve and a historical fall, by which what I mean is minimally that Adam and Eve were real people in history, okay? You could point over and look and see Adam walking around and Eve, and that the historical fall was a real event, and that this has a...
I'm not going to use the stupid data joke because I'm so tired of that joke now. The text... A literary analysis of the text does not support that. As someone who believes in other sources of authority, who believes that all 3 or 4 or 5 sources of authority, however you want to break up the number, are each column of faith, supports each other. They're actually one whole tradition. They're one word of God. God doesn't speak twice, one word. I don't need the Bible to be pointing to a real Adam and Eve for me to believe there was an Adam and Eve. I have tradition, I have dogma, I have the Holy Church Fathers, I have Holy Tradition, I have liturgy, I have other reasons to believe in an Adam and Eve than the fact that a polemic in a collection of books names 2 characters, Adam and Eve. That's not even the real name. So I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to worry about Adam. I don't have to worry about... Why can't I remember Eve's name right now? I don't want to go grab the art scroll. But anyway, yeah. Let's just take this. Let's push back the Old Testament as far as we can. Let's say it was written 2000 BC. I mean, let's really push it back. Let's go 2000 BC. The story, the oral tradition of the first humanoid hominids to gain sentience would have to survive thousands of years before it's written down. You're taking a story that's the origin of the Jewish people, the Semitic people, maybe even at large, the people of the Levant. Maybe you can go as far as people of the Mediterranean, but I think that'd be stretching it. And you're now making this the origin, the global origin for all people. You're not just straining credibility. You're straining believability. You can't attack this issue the way you're attacking it and then try to connect the Adam and Eve of the literature to the literal Adam and Eve of creation. Their story would not have survived the flood. Their story wouldn't have survived the loss of knowledge from from the Tower of Babel being destroyed. You have several key points in the narrative itself where the knowledge would have been lost. And then to try to transpose the literary narrative onto history, which doesn't map out, is insane. You're not talking about the Gospels that are tied into a real place and a real time and a real location and a real time frame that you can play with. You can say, oh, it's 1 year, or his ministry was 3 years, and you can stretch it out and you can make adjustments so that way everything lines up. Even if people don't like that it lines up, you can make anything possible in that mix. But to have the story of Adam and Eve survive orally to the first temple period, for it to be written down, I think it has to be that they're collecting the stories of the surrounding cultures and synthesizing it to tell a uniquely Jewish version of those accounts. It's the accepted science of that time. It's the accepted facts of that time. It's the accepted history of that time, not the actual history of the world, but the concepts that are being described are what's true. Man did come to reason. Man did have a direct relationship with God. Man did violate that relationship with God. Man did sin. That sin caused irrevocable consequences that compounded as more people sinned. And you can call that original sin, or you can call that original grace, or you can call that, whatever you want to call it. Whether you want to use the Orthodox term, the Catholic term, the Jewish terminology, you can do all of that. But what you can't do is map out the history that we have in this to the history that we have in the Bible. It doesn't match that way. There is a point in the Bible where literal history begins to happen, begins to occur. History and by facts, I don't mean that they're true. I just mean they're things that we can line up to real events, and we can say this really happened or this didn't happen. We can say, okay, the first temple, the Canaanites, here's what the Bible says, and here's what the story, and here's what history says. Okay, this didn't happen. Okay, this is what the Bible says. This is what history says. This did happen. We have proof for this. There weren't camels, so it couldn't have been camel. It has to be something else. We can do all that when the facts start appearing. But the first few books of Genesis were pre-fact. We're primordial, we're primeval, we're pre-history. And the thing about prehistories is that they're unprovable. So it has to be doing something else than telling history.
Universal and ultimate explanatory significance for what it means to be human. In other words, Genesis 2-3 is telling us about real events in...
Gavin, I know you're super smart, and I know you probably don't watch my channel, but can I recommend? Read this book, okay? It has different collections of different histories, and it kind of explains the process of writing history, especially in a time and period where history was partially mythology and partially propaganda. I know you know this stuff. I know you got this down, but can I recommend reading this so you can pull away from the way you're explaining this to people who are already not going to accept what you're saying? Could you go back and read the first book of Livy? Go back and read the first book of Herodotus. Go back and read Hesiod's Theogony. And see how these stories are being told. Go back and read the creation myths, the Mesopotamian creation myths. You need to have that context fresh. It's been too long since I've read these things, so I wouldn't even try giving a full-throated explanation. But you need to have a fresh take on this before you before you do what you're doing.
In history that tell us most deeply who we really are. Okay? Why is that important? I'll give 3 reasons: a biblical, theological, and apologetical.
Okay, Livy, I'm the emperor, and I need you to go write a story. I need you to tell the origin of our people and who we really are, and I need you to connect it to the Aeneid. I know you don't like. I know you don't like the Aeneid. I know you don't like the author, but I really need you to connect that origin that the people accept to the origin of my throne, so that way people will accept my power. So go write a history, and make sure it connects to the religion. Make sure it connects the religion to my ruling, and make sure it connects my family line, or at least the line of Caesar, to a god or goddess. Okay, got it? Good. All right, we're gonna make everything legitimate. Do you kind of see the problem?
Or having to do with apologetics, specifically having to do with theodicy, or responding to the problem of evil. So you could say the 3 reasons here are: number 1, the doctrine of Scripture; number 2, the doctrine of humanity; and number 3, the doctrine of evil. First, the doctrine of Scripture. If we have a high view of Scripture, as I do, if we think...
Okay. Gavin, why? Okay, so let's pretend that Genesis is the first. Genesis 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 12 and Numbers 3 are all the first things ever written in the Bible. Why Numbers 3? Because I just wanted a random one. And let's say they were written before everything else. And let's say chronologically they really did happen first. And that they had in mind the book of Matthew when they were writing Genesis. Let's just say that's true. You could still write the story to match your intent without it literally happening. Now, let's come back to reality. The people who were writing Genesis had no idea they were writing the Bible. The people who were writing Genesis had no idea what was going to happen in the books of the prophets. The people who were writing Genesis had no idea what was going to happen in the Deuterocanonical books. So the people, the human authors, not the divine inspiration that was given to them, the human authors have no way of knowing that Jesus was coming. They are not predicting the coming Messiah. We are typologically putting the prediction of the coming Messiah into Genesis, and we're reading into and recontextualizing that story to show how that story influences the Old Testament, influences the Maccabean period, influences Jesus and the period around Jesus. And then after Jesus dies and is resurrected and come back, how it influences the writing of Revelation. Revelation is amazing because it ties back to everything. We're tying it all together, but when they wrote it, they weren't connected. Or if they were connected, they were connected to the priestly group that was writing it, because they were trying to connect to the laws that they were given to people, and they were trying to say, hey, look, here's how it's legit. Here's the story that makes the laws make sense. There was a purpose to it. There was it was connecting the people together, turning them into one group instead of multiple groups. Instead of 12 different tribes, they're now one family. We're now connected to our enemies and our allies by blood.
basically Scripture is trustworthy revelation from God, then we need to take seriously its portrayal of Adam. And it really looks like in the Bible, Adam is it's tricky because Adam is employed in an array of archetypal and literary and typological ways.
That's what I just said in way too many words.
Nonetheless, he looks like a real person, okay, a real historical figure, and so also with.
How does he look like a real person? I mean, I'll grant you, on faith, I believe he's a real person. He's a real person. But how does he in the narrative look like a real person? You got to understand, Gav. You make a powerful argument for the literalness, for the realness of the existence of Jesus Christ. You're using the gospel to help prove that Jesus was a real person. And then you're using the same argument to say that Adam was a real person because the gospels connect Jesus to Adam. And that Adam's minor story plots match how a real person is. He's typological. He's archetypal. That's the whole point of Jordan Peterson's discussion. Go read Maps of Meaning one more time. Adam is an archetype. He's representing mankind. He's representing humans. So his flaws have to be real human flaws. Otherwise, it's not an archetype. If it's not relatable to almost all people, it's no longer an archetype.
Eve. And this is where I, in my writing on this, depart from some other treatments I've mentioned, like Scott McKnight and Peter Enns and others, who I think sometimes what happens is because the idea of Adam is used as a kind of construct, or it's used as a type, that is set over and against Adam's historicity. But you can have figures.
Okay, so by type and construct, he's talking about archetype. That's what I meant by archetype is what he's talking about here about type and construct.
That function in a literary way or a typological way, like Melchizedek is an example of this in the book of Hebrews.
Correct.
He serves to represent a certain kind of priesthood. You know, Adam is used like this in Jewish literature in the intertestamental period in the New Testament.
But again, understand the original author may not have had that intent, but it was through that opening, through that gap that he left, that you have writings like the Talmud and writings like the New Testament, which exploit that opening, exploit that open concept, and based on the theology of the group who's writing the story, who's writing the new story, they recontextualize that older story to match the new typology. Philosophy is the art of weak men defeating strong men by convincing the weak man that they are dumb and the smart man that they are smart. It's a trick. Here we're talking about a literary trick. It is a authorial trick of the writing. Now, I don't know original Hebrew. I don't know original Greek. I'm not going to pretend to, but I have read enough commentary to know that this is even acknowledged by the rabbinical fathers who hold this story as true, as absolutely true. The rabbinical fathers still can acknowledge this. The fact that you can't acknowledge it, the fact that your audience is unwilling to acknowledge it, is a problem.
Doesn't mean he wasn't a real person. And in the Bible, Adam seems like a real dude. He seems like a real person. He's included in genealogies, 3 of them, Genesis 5, 1 Chronicles 1, and Luke 3. Now, by the way, if you're wondering here in Genesis 5 what it means when it says Adam begot Seth in his own image, that's a fascinating little phrase. I wrote a whole article on that phrase. I think it's really interesting. But this is really significant. To my awareness, there's not precedent for including a merely mythical or fictional person in a genealogy in ancient literature.
I got good news for you, my audience. I got good news for you. I know you were worried about this. It turns out Hercules, Venus, Zeus, a giant python, dragons were all real and really existed, and they really are the ancestors of the people that they say they are. King Arthur, Pendragon, really did have a dragon as an ancestor. Julius Caesar really is the ancestor of Aeneas, the ancestor of Romulus and Remus, who are definitely real people. He's he's the ancestor of Aphrodite or Venus, depending on what culture you're from. Good news. All the Egyptian kings are totally related to Horus and Osiris. And they are real. Because no one would include a fictional character in their genealogy. Fuck. We got a comment in the chat. Thank you, Ad Astra. I appreciate that. I do. This is frustrating to listen to. I appreciate that, Ad Astra. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I've not seen that, and I'm aware that people often claim that we don't really see that. So this is to me, this is the strongest way to just show.
Did he just say he'd never seen that? Okay, hold on. I'm gonna do a thing I used to do in my videos. I don't do anymore because it loses audience. I don't care. I'm doing it now. I give you a short list of books that, according to Gavin Ortland's statement, he's never read. He's never read the Gallic Wars. He's never read any of the collections of Diodorus Siculus. He's never read... Oh, no, the Sappho doesn't include that. He's never read Livy. He's never read Plutarch. He's never read Arrian. He's also never read the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which is right there. Harpinder. Gah. Shall we continue on?
So we need a real person named Adam that you could point to. And I would say it's even stronger than what people usually go to, and that's Romans 5 and 1 Corinthians 15. Even though I think those passages are strongly suggestive, somebody could argue that you have a comparison there between Adam and Christ that is kind of disanalogous. Like a friend of mine once gave me this sample sentence as an example. Lady Liberty has founded our nation, and Adolf Hitler is setting out to destroy it. Somebody could say that during World War II. It's a meaningful, kind of a strange sentence, but it's a meaningful sentence. Just like when Paul talks about Adam, Christ, okay, yeah, you could maybe try to make a case that there's something going on like that where these two figures are not parallel in their historicity. But the genealogies, I don't know how any way around that, because genealogies don't deal with mythic people or people who are fictional, who don't really exist, or who are merely typological or something like that. And with Adam, we have specific information about how long he lived, how old he was when he fathered certain children. I'll put up Genesis 5 again, for example. He's 130 years old when he has Seth. Now, even if you think the long ages are symbolical or something like that, still, we have the specific information of he's fathering certain children like Seth and Cain and Abel and so forth. In his commentary on Genesis, Augustine points to Adam's fathering of children as a reason not to interpret him as merely figurative, because he's basically saying, well, look, are the kids figurative too? You know, if Adam's not a real person.
Okay. Let's bring this back to reality. Is it Absalom? Absalom is a real historical character, the first king of Jerusalem. We have no evidence for any previous king. Solomon can be completely mythical, David can be completely mythical, and Saul can be completely mythical, and Absalom can still be the first king of Jerusalem. A real person with semi-historical, semi-fictional ancestors, that the further you go back, the less likely they are to be real, that connect back to Abraham, who most secular scholars believe was fictional, which connects back to God. Well, connects back to Adam, which connects back to God. You have a line, a holy line of people, a traditional line, creation of people. Absalom, real, solid. David, not so much. Solomon, not so much. They're in a book. The further you go back, the less likely it is that it's true. Lowercase d. Less likely actual. Still can be true, capital T, but not lowercase t. Any? No? Yes? Maybe?
Person who was Cain's father. and that's a totally legitimate question. Only real people can have Cain's saying, well, look, are the kids figurative too? You know, if Adam's not a real person, who was Cain's father? and that's a totally legitimate question. Only real people can have children, right?
If Absalom's... Oh, I'm sorry. If Solomon's not a real person, who's Absalom's father? This is terrible argumentation. If David's not a real person, who's Solomon's father? If Saul's not a real person, who did David fight? Crappity. Crappity, crappity, crappity. How can there be a first king of England if King Arthur didn't exist? This is not a good argument.
So that's biblically, it really looks like that's how Adam is being portrayed in the Bible. He's a real person, so is Eve. Secondly, and even more importantly, the doctrine of humanity. Human beings are qualitatively different from the animal kingdom. There's different aspects of human uniqueness. You can think of like the image of God. You can think of the soul. Not everyone believes in a soul. I believe in a soul. That's the traditional view, that a dualism, your body and soul.
Okay. Let me just. Okay. I believe in Adam and Eve. I believe in the fall. I believe in God. I believe in original sin. Do I believe you can prove those things from what's written in the Bible? Absolutely not. I think you can believe those things based on what's in the Bible. You can't prove them. I believe in evolution, and I can prove evolution. Oh, Gavin, what are you doing? You're not even getting your audience halfway in. Maybe a quarter way. A quarter way into your argument. There's no way they're going to believe you at the end of this. Where you're trying to get them and where you actually are taking them. So they're here. They don't believe. They believe it's all literal. You're trying to get them here to, I'm going to call it spiritual, and you're taking them this far. You're not even taking them halfway. You're taking them this far. Are they going to leap over and like get over this big hurdle and be like, yeah, you're right? I
our moral capacities, like our accountability.
In my opinion, from my experience, they're going to see this hurdle and their faith is going to break because you're trying to hold on to too much literalism to get them to the spiritual understanding. Start off with the spiritual understanding, and then any part of the literal that happens to be true simply supports the spiritual understanding. But if you start off with the literal understanding, any actual fact crumbles the foundation of the literal understanding, while any actual fact supports the spiritual understanding. Okay, so I have no idea what's going on in the chat. I took off my glasses. Someone got upset. Let me see. Let me read their comment. They're already gone. But it says, "Oh, you missed the return of Jesus Christ and did not hear him say to tell you the vision. Wow, that's too bad. Bye." Okay. So for those playing at home, Jesus can exist without the context. You can still have a man named Jesus. You don't have to have the typology to have Jesus exist. You don't even have to have the typology to know that Jesus is God. Jesus uses typology. Therefore, us as, you want to call us apologists, you want to call us theologians, you want to just call us students of the Bible, use typology to have deeper understandings of what the Old Testament is saying and what the New Testament is saying about the Old Testament. But if Jesus is God and the resurrection happened, that's all you need. Everything after that is, in a way, to quote another word and misapply it, is superabundant. Everything that's true in the Old Testament supports our faith. But you don't have to have all the support that you want. You can acknowledge that the Jewish writers were Jewish and not pre-Christians. You can acknowledge that each writer is independent, writing on their own while still being inspired by the Holy Spirit so we can get the correct message. You can acknowledge the reality of the situation without denying the Christology, without denying theology, without denying dogma. What you can't do is build dogma or typology or theology or Christology on lies, no matter how comforting they are. The words mean something, and the words matter. And you anachronistically throwing modern interpretations onto older material does not change what the older material originally meant. It can have deeper meaning to us as Christians about Christ. But for the audience that wrote it, that's not what they were thinking about. That's not what they were talking about.
To God, our potential for falling into sinfulness and needing salvation, our rational faculties, like our capacities for language. And
If you push typology too far, now you're just lying and you're creating false narratives that are not actually there.
Add on other things as well. Some of these people try to dispute in terms of how qualitative is this difference, when people talk about human beings as rational, and actually people try to point out like the upper level mammals like dolphins, and they try to say it's just a quantitative difference. But from a classic Christian standpoint, you have to recognize there are at least some things about human beings that are qualitatively unique, like the doctrine of the image of God, for example. We don't think that
So Jimmy Aiken has been arguing that animals have souls on his channel, and I kind of agree with him. So I'm not going to comment here, except to say that I agree with Jimmy Aiken.
dolphins are made in the image of God. Okay. So then you say, how do you explain human uniqueness apart from a punctiliar starting point to humanity?
Humans are uniquely cruel, and we have the ability to be way more dangerous than other animals. It's probably not the one you were looking for, though.
And by human uniqueness, you could just include all the things you think that are qualitatively unique about human beings. And what you get to very quickly is you see a historical Adam and Eve and a historical fall is an incredibly...
Okay, I'm just going to be blunt. We are an hour and 30 minutes in. We are 15 minutes into this video. I am going to try to get to Dan McCullen's video tomorrow. I don't think we're going to get through all of this. I think we're going to get as far as we can go on this one. We'll stop it there, and then tomorrow we'll do as much of Dan McCullen's as we can do. And then Wednesday we're going to hopefully have an interview with a special guest. I'll announce that tomorrow if we nail down all the whatever that word is. But I think this is a failed attempt on Gavin's behalf. I don't think this is going to convince the evangelicals to take a more spiritual view of or allegorical view or polemic view of the Old Testament. And I don't think this goes far enough to appease the secular literary view, literarial view of the Bible, literary view of the Bible. I think this is bad apologetics, my friends. I think this is bad apologetics.
Useful, and I would say necessary, explanatory mechanism for that qualitative uniqueness and for the transmission of that qualitative uniqueness to everybody else around the globe. Because,
all right, hear me out. I've already offended some Christians in the audience, so let's just go all the way with this. I'm going to argue against my homie here, and I'm going to argue against it as an fictional, evangelical, fundamentalist Southerner in the great state of Texas. And I'm going to do so in character. Now, son, you have to understand that Adam is a typological representation of Jesus Christ. He is the first. Through him, sin came, and through Jesus, sin was destroyed. Adam had to exist because the Bible says he existed. Now, if you simply look at the evidence, you have to see that Jesus and Adam both existed because the Bible says they existed. You look at that all people are people. We all have two eyes, all have a mouth, all have a soul, all walk on two legs. Of course we are all related. Brothers and sisters, if you would not understand that we are related, then racism would abound. Then tribalism would abound. No, it is by the uniqueness of our creation, by the uniqueness of us all being together as one through the unique person of Adam, that we exist. And you have to have the flood, because look at the evidence of a flood. You look at the evidence. Of course there was a flood. You don't see dinosaurs walking around the world today, do you? And Mr. Gavin, how can you not see that the Bible account is the only historical account that matches what we know about history? That the world is 6,000 years old. Are you crazy? Are you crazy to think that it's anything but? Now, let's go another way. Let's go another way. I'm going to show you the flaw the other way. Let's go the scientific route, and why Gavin's argument fails on both ends. You have the creation of the universe. You have the Big Bang. You have stardust. You have evolution and creation. You have the primordial ooze. You have animals coming from the deep, cells dividing until finally you get a subspecies of primate. You have to have the dinosaurs, which we have archaeological evidence for. You have ice ages, which we have archaeological evidence for, geological evidence for. You have the development of the first societies happening in different areas unrelated to each other. You have peoples in the Americas, peoples in Iran, peoples in Babylon, peoples in the is it Indo-Kush region? I can't remember it anymore. But anyway, you have these people in these different communities separated out, and there's time difference between them, so you can see evidence of migration. You have different genetic groups and genetic markers in people. You have different substratas of human beings. You have Neanderthal. You have other humanoids, including little tiny humanoid people that died out in Africa. You have genetically and population-wise no way to connect them to the area where the Garden of Eden is said to exist. What you do have is a type of memory of a land that has been sunk under by water, which is common to many cultures, just like Atlantis. You have a myth that might have some truth to it, tying into the history of humanity. And that history is disconnected. And it isn't until later times that people started to crossbreed. And we can see this as evidence in our genetics. I don't think either one of those arguments are satisfied by your argument. I think you can say that the Bible is true. I think you can say that Genesis is a polemic against the other cultures and the influences of the other cultures, and that Adam and Eve represent the theological truth that humanity has fallen. It recognizes the theological, and we claim literal truth that God is the creator and he created all life, and that at some point he created man because we currently exist. I think you can say that. I think you can make the argument Jimmy Akin makes. I think you can make the argument Trent Horn makes. I don't think you can make the argument you are making. Because the two other views here, the two opposing views, are going to wipe out your view altogether. And you satisfy nobody.
Because you don't get, it's very hard to see how you get qualitative uniqueness sequentially. You know, if you're just like evolving along, it's hard to see how you wouldn't have like, well, now they're 80% made in the image of God and then 81% and so forth. So historical Adam and Eve basically puts the pieces of the puzzle together for just having what we theologically want to say about human beings. The third reason would be, and this is in some respects the most poignant one, is the problem of evil. So it's really a...
I just ranted about the Bible is literature, or at least the Hebrew Bible is literature. The Old Testament, specifically Genesis, or at least Genesis in the creation story, is polemic. And I just opposed it, just petitioned it, whatever, against juxtaposition, against just opposed it, the scientific historical view. And then I said the happy compromise is to take a literature point of view and then apply it to the interpretation you have on history. I don't think I'm going to try to tackle the problem of evil.
Concern if we make God the author of evil. And that applies to other things in the world, but it also applies to human nature. Without a historical fall, without a before and after, without a, we were good and then we became bad. We were innocent and then we fell into guilt. It's very hard to see how we don't make God the author of evil.
BS, if you're listening, or if any of my other regulars, do I want to try to tackle the problem of evil in the next 15 minutes? Give me an answer. If you guys tell me to, I'll give it a line. If not, I'm just going to keep moving forward. Ad Astra, what do you think? Do I want to try to tackle the problem of evil? We are only 16 minutes into this thing.
Think of like in some of my other videos on my video advocating for the moral argument, I talked about chimpanzee wars. I was trying to, there's these famous, it's fascinating, these like 4-year wars going on between these different tribes of chimpanzees and so forth. Well, if you're just going from the animal kingdom, where like horrific violence is just par for the course, and you just slowly, quantitatively get into human beings, and there's never any kind of threshold where you cross, where there's a period at which we are good and then we become bad, it's very hard to see how God isn't the author of evil. And this is a real big concern. There's a helpful article in this book, I'll put up on the screen, that Henri Blocher talks about this, and he just warns against this. And he's saying, we need to see evil and sinfulness as an alien intrusion into God's good creation. And that applies.
Okay, hold on. Do it in 1 minute? You know what, Ad Astra? I'm going to do it. I'm going to get a timer. Give me 1 second to get my phone. I'll be right back, okay? I'm going to get some water too. I'm going to be right back, and then I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it I'm going to try to do the problem of evil in 1 minute. I'll be right back.
Me, keep my head down, let my mouth speak. They surround me, they all about the clout. See where the crowd be. Every time I speak loudly, they more about me. Man, you know I got a bounty on these lousy ass haters that surround me. So they doubt me, they don't know nothing about me. So their mouths free, I'ma change that soon. Better watch out now, see?
I just wanna be the greatest. Yeah. Man, I just wanna be famous. Yeah, I just wanna be the greatest. Yeah. Man, I just wanna be famous. Yeah.
And I'm not playing any more games. Either put me on the charts or I'll put you up in flames. Better recognize art, cause I don't forget names. Should've seen me from the start, coming at you like a train. Think I'm about to fall apart every single fucking day. Seeing all these damn stars with my well-deserved fame. And I spit these gold bars while they spitting out shit. Man, I give this shit hard, but it gives me back pain. I wanna be a spectacle, they skeptical. But man, I got that chemical, exceptional. I do it all intentional, professional. So I can make that decimal incredible. I'm not thinking, man, they're saying that I've gone insane. I'm not ever gonna make it cause the game has changed. I'm not good enough, man, no that's not okay. Tell me that shit again and I'll stop your brain.
I just wanna be the greatest. Yeah. Man, I just wanna be famous. Yeah. Yeah, I just wanna be the greatest. Yeah. Man, I I just wanna be famous. Yeah.
Now wake up, you got some shit to do. It's 6 a.m., I don't care, you got some shit to prove. Cause right now, you ain't got nothing that big to lose. So get your ass to work and don't you dare hit snooze. Can't stop this, I'm obnoxious, and I'm honest and novice. With promise, made monstrous, I'm conscious, but I'm nauseous. Think I've lost it, I've got it. Spitting all this, still I'm not it, I've got this. I will not quit, man, I'm all in. Ballin', on a budget, man, I'm stalling. Crawling, cause I'm nothing, but I'm all in. Calling, I'll be something, yeah, I'ma get it now. You can leave if you don't like it. Say it out loud, you believe it, you can bite this. Keep my head down and I keep on going timeless. Make it somehow, I believe it when I write this.
I just wanna be the greatest.
Okay. So, we are VR. 1 minute to explain the problem of evil, of why it doesn't have to apply to Gavin's argument, and where it does have to apply to my argument. In 1 minute. All right. Okay. So here we go. The problem of evil is that if there is a good and just God, God can create a world without evil. And because evil and suffering exist in the world, many people believe that means that there is not a just God. And if the formula for a God is that the God must be good and just, therefore, some say that that means that because evil exists, that a God, a good God, cannot exist. Well, I disagree with that, and I think Gavin trying to apply that to his theology is an unnecessary burden, because only through the church fathers and tradition is it necessary to have the idea of original sin and the temporal consequences of sin. But if you're not tied to the Catholic faith, and you want to just believe in Jesus Christ, and you want to be a Protestant or some other denomination, such as Orthodoxy, you don't have to believe in original sin. Ad Astra, I did it.
Applies to human nature. Jamie Smith has a similar point in this article in this book, which I'll put up. He talks about this as the danger of naturalizing sin. And this is a real concern. So I'm being brief and I'm abstracting from a lot more, by the way. Sorry if I talk about my books too much, but this is all coming out of this book. If you're interested more in this, Retrieving Augustine's Doctrine of Creation, it's in the video description. Check it out. But minimally, what I'm trying to say now is we need a historical Adam and Eve as real people, a historical fall as a real event, and this is the explanation of the human story. Okay? However, that leaves open a lot of questions. If you're paying attention to those 4 questions I put out at the front, the numbers 2 through 4 are still kind of open here. And what I want to argue is that there's a need, and this is the second main argument of this video, is that
So many slides. Did he go to the Jimmy Akin School of Presentation?
and this is going to take longer. Okay, we should be patient with the possibility of harmonizing this true historical account we have in the early chapters of Genesis with the current paleoanthropological and genetic claims. In other words,
So, okay, tomorrow night I'm going to do the Dan McCullen video, assuming he doesn't take it down or block it or something like that. I'm going to do the Dan McCullen one tomorrow, which will have the exact opposite take. So hopefully he says enough stupid things that I can get just as animated about what he said, so no one calls me a false Christian. But he's usually pretty careful about his words, so who knows. Then we're going to have an interview on Wednesday with a special guest from another channel. More information to come on that. On Thursday, instead of having an open room, we will then do either the rest of this video or the rest of Dan McCullen's, maybe in the rest of both, but I doubt it. And depending on which video has a better reaction, more comments, that kind of thing. And we'll finish that off, and that will be the end of Genesis week. And I do have another video popping up tomorrow morning at 6:30 in the morning. It's going to be my interview. It's going to be my review of The second night debate of Jimmy Akin and James White. This one is on how to find peace with God or justification, and or how to find peace with God after justification. I don't know. It got kind of complicated with the titles because they didn't know what topic they were debating. It was a mess of it was a very chaotic debate, without it being aggressive. So anyway, looks like that's it. I got about 10 more minutes. Anybody in the chat have any questions for me on this? Anybody wants to know where I stand? Please ask me now. We got about 10 minutes. I'm going to start playing the outro music in about 5 minutes. And then 5 minutes after that, we are going to close up for the night. So if you have anything to ask me, please ask me now. I'm going to go a little bit more in this while I'm waiting for a response.
It's legitimate to consider efforts at harmonizing a historical Adam and Eve and a historical fall with evolutionary science. And I'm not going to tell you how to close the lid on this, and I don't know how to do it. And I'm not going to say here's exactly how it all fits together. But I'm arguing for a certain posture. I'm saying it's legitimate to look into this, to be patient with this, to consider this. The arguments I'm going to give for this are from the text of Scripture. I'm not going to argue from science. Okay, I'm not a scientist, so I kind of leave that to the side. But that's obviously a real issue as well. I'm not saying that's unimportant, but I'm going to speak from my own area as a theologian and just make 2 points to argue for a posture and a disposition of humility, open-mindedness, consideration, give this careful review, and then I'll give you some options that people have proposed, but I'm not going to say here's exactly how you have to come to a conclusion, but patience for the process. That's all I'm trying to argue at this point. It's a modest goal, okay? Because frankly, a lot of people aren't very patient for that, and they're kind of like, oh, why would you ever do that? I don't think that's helpful. I don't think that's what we need. Let me give 2 reasons why. From the Scripture. The first one is Genesis 4. I think there are features in the text of the early chapters of the Bible, especially Genesis chapter 4, that invite questions about the possibility of other people outside the Garden of Eden. And this is what comes up with Genesis 4, which is a hugely neglected and important chapter. By the way, Genesis 4 is part of the same literary unit. So you got Genesis 1, that's kind of its own thing, big picture creation. And you've got Genesis 2 and 3. Genesis 4 is a part of that same literary unit. And then you have a block with the genealogy in Genesis chapter 5. So when you go from Genesis 2 to 3 to Genesis 4, you're going from the Garden of Eden to outside the Garden of Eden. Your geographical reference is expanding outwards. By the way, the very fact that there's a Garden of Eden at all is interesting. The whole world is not the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden is this special, unique sanctuary place of God's presence. When you get out of that place and you look around, you notice some curious things. First, Cain, the first generation son of Adam and Eve, is introduced as having a wife without any explanation. Yes, I know how people explain that. We'll talk about that. But it's just interesting. It's like, he's got a wife. Okay. Second, when he's banished to wander throughout the earth, he's afraid that others will find him and kill him. Okay. That's really interesting. Third, he builds a city. Okay. Now, the traditional answer on a lot of this in the main is that this is his brothers and sisters. Okay. He's marrying his sister. He's afraid of his brothers or slightly distant relatives, nieces and nephews as you go a little further and so forth. And he's building a city with his nieces and nephews and brothers and sisters and so forth. These are all just Adam's other children. Here is the thing about that. I'll often have people who, when I'm advocating, say, hey, let's keep an open mind.
For those who know other languages, in the Bible, in this section, the word that they use for build a city is the word city, town, village. I'm kind of curious because I know we're translating it as city, but what is the word in Hebrew? Is it the word for a town, for a neighborhood, for a village? What's it saying? Okay, we have a comment here on the bottom. I am curious why you take any of the supernatural parts to be true. The short answer, that's from Ad Astra. Thank you for the question. The short answer is that I'm Catholic and I believe in the supernatural. I just don't think that what movies say is supernatural is what supernatural is. I don't think any movies got into supernatural correct. I don't think a poltergeist is a person or a projection of a monstrous figure or someone's decaying body. I don't think souls weigh 28 grams or 21 grams or whatever the movie said. I don't think that demons look like gargoyles, considering that gargoyles were created to scare the demons away because the demons were so fragile. It forgets the etymology and the history of these things, of why they were created that way in the first place. The devil's not called the devil in the Bible. I mean, he's not called Satan. He's not called Lucifer. There's a lot of A lot of the demonology is really mixed up. You can learn this actually really quick if you simply look up all the gods and goddesses that are referenced in the Satanic Bible. But just because I think that the superstition and the drug-induced lucid wordplay of people is untrue doesn't mean that I don't believe in angels or that I don't believe in the soul or that I don't believe in God. Because I do believe in God, I do believe in angels, and I do believe in the soul. And I also have experienced supernatural things in my personal life, or supranatural, I should say. But I've had supernatural experiences. And other people that I know and that I trust have had these kind of experiences too. So I don't dismiss them. I don't think they're impossible. I just don't think that what most people call supernatural or metaphysical events are. I think miracles are called miracles for a reason, because they're rare. And while I'm okay with the idea of an everyday miracle, I don't believe in luck, I don't believe in magic, I don't believe in fate, and I don't believe in them specifically because the Bible, when I was 13 or 14 and I read it for the first time, said it wasn't real. And I was like, well, if this book that everybody says is talking about magic says magic isn't real, maybe I'm misunderstanding what magic is, and maybe I'm misunderstanding what miracles are. And I started down a whole quest down the nonfiction section, learning about magic for the next 5 to 6 years, and found out most of it was bunk or bullshit or woo-woo. And it was just drug-induced nonsense created by Crowley and a few other people. So that's why I don't believe in the generic, common, superstitious stuff, but why I still leave the door open for religious supernatural or supernatural and metaphysical transcendency. So, yeah. Okay, and that's about it on time. Ad Astra, thank you for being a wonderful audience member today. BS, if you're still watching, I hope you're having a great night. To Wesley Curry II, I'm sorry I offended you by not being a literalist. And who else? Did we have any other guests today? Nope, that's about it. For those of you watching tomorrow, please comment down below what your opinion is on this. I would love to hear it. I know a lot of you guys are watching around 10:30 a.m. I'm at work at that time, so I won't be able to comment till I get out of work. I want to thank you all for watching. I do have a Patreon. I will start putting up a link to that later on. I guess next week I'll start putting a link to that in my videos, and I guess in my live streams. I got to figure out a way to do that. You can also support me on Streamlabs. There is a link for that. There's merch, and you can tip. I don't know how people tip, but you can tip. I got in a tip before. I don't know how that works. I'd like to thank you all. Real quick, I did go to a Comic-Con this weekend. I did get to see Vince D'Onofrio, who's actually really skinny. I did get to meet Greg Capullo, which was really awesome. He's my favorite artist of all time. Comic book artist of all time, I guess I should say. And it was a fun time. I just want to say thank you for all your support. I appreciate all of you. I know that a lot of people are uncomfortable with a Christian or a Catholic speaking the way that I do about religious matters and about biblical matters. But what matters for a Catholic is that you're not going against the church, and that you're living and you're following the guidance of your priest and your bishop and the Pope. And you're not going against any dogmatic, infallible rulings. Considering there's only a few infallible statements, there's not really a lot to go against. You just have to not go against the things that are declared. And I have checked with my priest, and I have, through the priest, through actually a few priests, checked to make sure that I'm going with whatever the bishop is okay with. And I have read a few bishop statements on this channel before. So I'm good on that matter. I'm a Catholic in good standing. But I know that unless you're Jimmy Aiken and you find a way to say this where it sounds more legit, it does sound weird to hear a Christian and a Catholic say these things. That's not a liberal. But yeah, it is what it is, man. I've been reading as much serious text as I can in the Bible for a very long time, and I avoided the apologetic material as much as I can, and for a preference for the scholarly material, which means it's harder to find and it's more expensive, but it's what I've been doing. Anyway, I like original sources, and I recommend you all read the Church Fathers if you haven't. Peace be with you, and just remember we're all sinners, and don't judge anyone. Love each other, forgive yourselves. Remember, God's already forgiven you, and I hope you all have a great night.